If you're looking for something to make your balls shrivel up and make you want to crawl back up into your mother's uterus, if you're looking for a video that will be a total boner killer, you have come to the right spot. Today we will be counting down the top 5 scariest video game villains of all time. As is always the case with these type of lists, everything is subjective. Everybody has their own personal opinions. Things that make my nipples hard might not do anything for you, so just keep that in mind. But you can always voice your opinion. Let me know what your top 5 scariest video game villains are in the comment section, and stay tuned for the end of the video where we will talk about our honorable mentions, those video games that didn't quite make our top 5 but are still worth mentioning as some of the scariest villains out there. So stay tuned. We'll usually do those right before mentioning our top number 1 scary villain. Let's get straight into it. Let's start off with number 5. We have Twin Victim, also known as Doublehead. It's an incredibly disfigured being, and it's incredibly difficult to really describe its disgusting appearance. But if you've ever had siblings and you've ever been in the situation where your mother comes in, belt in hand, asking who did it, it basically perfectly summarizes what this figure looks like. It goes around whispering and pointing at you. For the most part, it doesn't really attack you unless you come too close to it or you engage with it. In terms of that, it's actually a pretty chill character. He's the kind of villain you could have a brewski with and hang 10. That is, if he wasn't trying to beat you to death. As I mentioned previously, unless you actually attack it, it won't actually come after you. The creature mostly seems content with just pointing at you and making you feel creepy and uneasy. And that is the main reason that it deserves to be in the top 5. As I mentioned before, it's not necessarily the most formidable foe in the gaming universe, but it definitely makes you feel uneasy, and it will often keep you from having a good night's rest. If you're ever interested in pulling an all-nighter and you would like to remain awake for the next few days, then number 4 is a perfect candidate to help you on your quest. For number 4, we have Laura from the Evil Within video game franchise. She is mostly a recurring character in the first Evil Within. However, there is a way to trigger her appearance in the sequel. Her disgusting appearance is scary enough, but if you really want to send chills all the way down to your butt cheeks, the perfect way to do that is to set her on fire. Her screams will definitely do that for you. A perfect description of her would be basically a Karen without makeup out in the public, screaming when she doesn't get her way. Adrienne Wilkinson, who actually did the voice acting for her, did an absolutely fantastic job. She is actually a big heavy hitter within the voice acting community. For those of us that, have been gaming for quite some time, will be very familiar with her. She's had roles in video games such as Star Wars Force Unleashed, Saints Row number 2, and many other smaller projects. If you thought we were going to give you an opportunity for a breather with this particular list, then you're definitely mistaken. For number 3, we actually have the matriarch from Evil Within, which is basically this big giant disfigured witch looking creature, but this boss actually serves as basically the final boss, if I'm not mistaken, for the Evil Within number 2. This is definitely one hellish creature. Even after you've severed both of her arms, that's just not going to stop her. She actually tries to gnaw you down with her chompers. It's definitely not a boss to be taken lightly, and if you really want to lose a couple of days worth of sleep, this is the perfect boss to jump into. Although, as I previously mentioned, keep in mind that this particular boss is towards the end of the Evil Within sequel. For number 2, we're actually going to have a villain so memorable that she didn't even appear in a fully released video game. We're going to be talking about Lisa, who is a ghost in an unreleased video game from Kojima. This was supposed to be somehow tied into the Silent Hill universe. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, it was a canceled video game, so all we got to see were little glimpses of it. But that was enough to send chills all the way down to your spine. It was enough for your nose hairs and pubes to just stand up. It was basically a ghost that had been shot by her husband while being pregnant, and it was basically a villain that would appear repeatedly through a hallway that you were stuck in some sort of loop. As I mentioned before, we didn't really get to find out too much about the character or too much about the video game itself, but her long, sleek, slender appearance and her smile is absolutely haunting and would even make the most hardcore men out there cry. I am talking straight up men that can grow James Harden like beards. I am talking about hardcore men that have watched Batman and Robin on repeat, The video game obviously makes us wonder what it could have been. Eventually, we did get some news, however, that potentially Kojima could revive this project and could revisit it. There were some rumors, and there was kind of a little bit of announcement revolving the Silent Hill video game franchise. However, from the trailer, from the teaser, it doesn't seem to really be connected to the 2014 release or the the little demo that was released way back then. But we can only hold out hope that somehow this particular villain can somehow slip into this version of the new Kojima project. Our top spot might be a tad bit controversial, not so much because it's not a villain that doesn't get mentioned as one of the scariest, but I don't think I've ever heard of it as the number one top scariest villain of all time. However, that's how I personally refer to it. I've mentioned this before. I feel like Resident Evil number 7 and number 8 really hit their stride. They were in first person. They really put you right in front of the danger, and it wasn't as action-packed. You weren't this big giant wrecking creatures and enemies. It definitely made you feel a little bit more human, and the franchise as a whole has felt a lot more grounded since then. But without further ado, our number one scariest video game villain of all time has to be the baby from Resident Evil Village, which is basically just this big giant homunculus who goes around trying to swallow Ethan. It's grotesque, it's hideous, it's just this big giant toothless being that goes around chasing you. His legs are completely deformed, as well as his entire body and his face. I think there are different levels of fear when it comes down to this particular character, not so much just because of his appearance, but also the noises that it makes. It still sounds like a newborn child. But the other, I think, even scarier aspect of this has to do with Ethan's fears about what potentially his future could hold. He feels a lot of guilt, and I think all of that plays into this hallucination, or at least what most of us would like to think is an hallucination. So even though this character might not even be a true real character, it might be more of an apparition, or as I mentioned before, an hallucination, I still feel like it definitely captured our imagination. It made us wonder what this creature was really capable of. The other big thing about it is it's not really a killable character. For the most part, you just have to run away, and the way that this villain, or the way that this creature actually devours Ethan, is absolutely grotesque. Do not eat a heavy lunch before playing this game, because you might actually be throwing it back up. And no matter who you are, no matter how attractive you are, nobody looks good throwing up. But anyways, guys, that is our list for today. Thank you guys for tuning in, for sticking around till the end of the video. I don't usually say this, it goes without saying, but if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you guys think of this particular list. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.